Legends, I hope you're all amazing. On today's video, we've got the Carl Martin dual compressor limiter on the bench. This is a pretty unique design where you have independent compression and level controls for the two channels on the pedal. You can foot switch between them with this select switch. You've got a shared threshold and dry control. Let's hear it over a quick little funky jam. Then I'm going to go through some of my favorite settings on here. We'll take a look at really squishy compressed tones and some more subtle tones on here, as well as playing around with this as a boost and a sustainer. Let's go. With just the left-hand side of the pedal, and I'll show you the range of compression that you can get out of here. We'll start out with maximum squish, which means I need the dry and the threshold at their minimum value. I'll start out with the level control just above noon and the compression quite low. You'll notice as I turn up the amount of compression, I will need to turn up the level. That's a makeup gain control. Of course, I could just use the level as a boost, but we'll get to that a little bit later in the video. Let's hear the bypass tone. threshold at the minimum, basically everything that I'm putting into that is being compressed. And you could hear when I crank the compression and the level, it's absolutely obliterating the signal. It does make it super easy to play. And if I was going for, I guess, a sort of lead enhancer tone, I'd probably run the compression around 1 o'clock with the level all the way up. And you can actually see that's how I've set up the right-hand side of this pedal. So if I wanted an always on, I guess just general tone enhancer and embiggening effect, I'd probably run something like this, a compression around 11 o'clock, the level around 3 o'clock on there. Let's have a listen to what that does, but then I'll switch over using the select knob to that lead style compressor. So I get heaps of sustain on there. And also, it sounded pretty great as a boost with the level all the way up and the compression down. So that's another way you could set it up for your always on funky compressor. Go to the other side, just crank the level and have the comp at minimum, and you've got a great sounding front end boost. Now with the threshold at minimum, you get a very exaggerated effect. That's how I would set up this pedal with the 2 channels if I really wanted it to sound like I had compression on all the time. However, the threshold control is massively going to open up the dynamic range on here. So what I'm going to do is I will start with this setting on the left-hand side. I'm slowly going to increase the threshold control to the point where it's just squishing down the peaks of my playing. So I'm going to try to aim to play pretty evenly on some open chords and not have a lot of compression, a very subtle effect, but when I really dig in, I just want it to squish it a little bit. So let's start off with this bypass. The threshold is at the minimum. There's no dry in there yet. like that. And I was pretty curious about where I had the threshold control because I can't quite see it from where I'm looking at the pedal. Turns out that's with the threshold at noon. So you probably could just start out with all the controls at noon on this pedal and get a great tone out of it. I'm going to leave the threshold right there, and we'll go between these two sides where I've got the right-hand side for a very exaggerated boost, and it's adding sustain on there, which I like. Something like this would also be really handy if you're playing on a silent stage or a quiet stage and you're lacking that feedback effect from the speaker and the guitar. You can use a compressor limiter like this to add some extra sustain on there. As we heard, toggling it on and off, you go from almost nothing to a nice big thick single note tone. That's really where I probably like this pedal the best. But let's introduce some dry on here. This is a really nice feature, especially if you want to have, say, this side over here set up for something quite subtle for some strumming, and then the right hand side again for more of a lead boost. Let's hear that. When you crank that dry control up, you've now got a fantastic sounding level boost on there where the compressor's not going to be doing anything. So my favorite settings on here, and again, the way I would set this up would be a tiny amount of dry, maybe around 9 o'clock maximum on there. I guess if you were using this on bass guitar, you could crank that up a little bit higher, but I'd use this left side for basically my always on enhancing tone there, which is compression somewhere below noon, just enough level where I can hear it glowing up the guitar a little bit. I always like that with a compressor rather than have it be super transparent. You turn it on and just add a little bit of extra grit with that level control. And then the right hand side I'd use for a totally over the top sustainer kind of sound. We heard all of this with a clean edge breakup style tone. Let's hear it into something really crunchy to finish. This two-channel design. Sometimes with compressors, you can have a favorite subtle setting and a favorite over-the-top setting, but you've got to choose them or add two of the same pedal onto your board. This gets around that perfectly, and it's also really simple to use. Once you get the threshold and the dry dialed into where you like it, you don't have to compromise between your favorite compressor sounds. I should also mention that this has a remote foot switching jack on the top. That would be perfect if you wanted to use this as a two-channel compressor with a foot switching system. If you want to learn more, I'll pop a link in the video description. A big thank you to Carl Martin for sending this out to me so I could make this video. I hope you enjoyed the tones. Grab your guitars now. Go make some loud guitar noises. I'll see you next time.